Sophia stood on the palace balcony, gazing out at the city below, her heart heavy with a burden she hadn't asked for. The engagement had been announced weeks ago, a royal decree. Prince Alexander, cold, calculating, and every bit the future king, had chosen her. Or rather, her family's status had sealed the deal. For Sophia, it was not love, but duty. As she adjusted the elegant gown draped over her shoulders, the weight of her family's expectations felt like chains. She was to marry into the monarchy, ensuring the legacy they'd built would endure. But at what cost? Her freedom? Her heart? Alexander had never once smiled at her, never once shown any emotion. He was a man of power, of rules, of control. "You'll grow to love him," her mother had whispered. But love, that seemed as distant as the stars above. The engagement party was lavish, filled with diplomats, royalty, and people she'd never met. Alexander stood by her side, offering a rare glance her way, his face unreadable. "You understand what's expected of you," he said quietly, his voice like ice. She nodded, though inside, her heart screamed. This wasn't what she had dreamed of. As the days passed, Sophia felt more like a prisoner than a princess to be. The palace was vast but suffocating. Alexander remained distant, absorbed in royal duties. Yet sometimes when no one was watching, she caught a flicker of something behind his cold gaze. Regret? Loneliness? She couldn't tell. One night, unable to bear the isolation any longer, she wandered through the palace, finding herself in a part of the estate she'd never seen. There, in a darkened hallway, she stumbled upon an old painting of a woman. The resemblance was striking. Her hair, her eyes, they mirrored Sophia's almost exactly. Who was she? The next morning, Alexander appeared at her door, his face set in a hard line. "I told you to stay out of the West Wing," he said, his voice sharp. But as their eyes met, his tone softened. "That woman, she was my mother. She died when I was young." Sophia stood frozen, unable to speak. Alexander's shoulders slumped, his mask cracking for the first time. "Everyone thinks I'm like my father, a ruler, heartless, cold. But the truth is, I'm haunted by her memory. I've spent my life trying to be the leader she wanted, but somewhere along the way, I forgot how to feel." Sophia's heart ached as she listened. He wasn't just a prince trapped by duty. He was a man bound by the ghosts of his past. Days passed, and Alexander slowly began to open up. Their conversations became less about royal obligations and more about who they truly were. Beneath the layers of power and responsibility, Sophia discovered a man who was vulnerable, who craved connection, just like her. One evening, as they sat together in the palace garden, Alexander turned to her, his eyes soft for the first time. "Let's leave this life," he whispered. "I'm tired of pretending. I want something real, with you." Sophia's breath caught. Could she trust him? Could she leave everything she knew behind for a chance at real love? The answer, she realized, was already in her heart. They fled the palace that night, leaving behind the crowns, the titles, the weight of expectations. Together, they built a new life, one free from the suffocating walls of royalty. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in their lives, they were free. Free to love, free to be themselves.